Vermont Governor Phil Scott appointing Jennifer Morrison to lead the Vermont Department of Public Safety. This comes after Michael Sherling announced he's taking a job at UVM. Commissioner Morrison is the first woman to lead the Vermont Department of Public Safety that overlooks the Vermont State Police, state's Division of Fire Safety, Emergency Management, and the state's Forensic Laboratory.
Commissioner Jennifer Morrison, thank you so much for joining us for NBC5 In Depth, and congratulations, you are a trailblazer.
Thank you so much. It's very kind of you.
Let's just jump right into it. The governor did lay out his 10-point plan, or I guess a framework to manage public safety in Vermont and what we're facing now. How big of a problem does Vermont face?
Well, we face a tremendous problem, not unlike other sectors, other sectors of the work world, a tremendous problem in staffing. So that and the intersection of a recent rise in violent crime, particularly drug and gun related crime, has created a sense of urgency. So, the staffing crisis is real. We're bordering on a public safety crisis. So that's why I think the governor is really trying to bring us all together and coordinate across the state so that we can deploy the scarce resources that we do have in a way that can be effective.
So state police has about 330 sworn officer positions, but there are about 50 vacant positions. So compared to years past, how does that differ?
It's the highest all-time vacancy rate. And, we have to remember that even though there are approximately 50 vacancies, that does not include people who are in positions but are unavailable for work, whether that's through a military deployment or an extended family leave or injury leave. So we are facing an epic staffing shortage. And I have to say, the men and women of the Vermont State Police have stepped up mightily. They are all filling voluntary overtime shifts each month. And then there is a mandatory call-out list that has to happen when the offer has been out there and nobody takes the shifts, then people are being ordered into work. And folks are putting their shoulder to the wheel and really doing a lot of overtime to try and meet the needs of the state of Vermont.
So there was a recent case in Burlington where the Burlington Police Department asked for Vermont State Police's help to patrol the area downtown because they were so short-staffed. So what does VSP have to give up in order to bring those troopers when you're already short-staffed to cover other areas?
Right, that's a great question, and one that I know a lot of folks are very curious about. I want to be very clear that that mission and any subsequent missions in any community that would be similar are filled on a voluntary overtime basis by troopers, and it does not impact their primary duties. So the 10 troopers that we sent to downtown Burlington were from our critical action team, and they went voluntarily. We are tracking hours. We have set up a code in our finance system to track the hours. And somewhere down the road, when we see if this becomes a recurring theme or if this happens in other communities, we'll determine whether or not we're going to bill on a quarterly basis. But we are tracking the hours by community. This is the only time so far. It's been the one time in Burlington. But, we build a certain amount of forecasting into our budget each year because we know that events or circumstances in communities are going to exceed their local resources. We certainly can't augment people's municipalities, police agencies on an ongoing basis. But when there's a real emergency, we are always going to be there to step up and meet those public safety needs across the state.
Would there ever be a case where Vermont State Police would not be covering a section of the state because you are so short-staffed?
No.
Okay. So basically,
could it ever happen? Sure, I guess it could someday happen. We are nowhere near that happening. And we are being very creative and very thoughtful about how we deploy our resources. And there is no part of the state that is fundamentally lacking in coverage.
Would you say that Vermont State Police, they are paying their troopers enough money, especially compared to other agencies and even states that are bordering our area?
I want to be careful how I answer this. There's the the Vermont Troopers Association is in a fact-finding process. They are working on an expired contract. And so there is an ongoing process in place to determine whether or not the asks that they made in this collective bargaining process are reasonable or not. So I want to sort of put that in the parking lot because I'm sensitive that this is an ongoing process that I don't want to unduly influence. I will say this as a global statement. I think it's imperative that the Vermont State Police be the premier law enforcement agency in the state, and that not just their wages, because as we know, a lot of folks, it's not just about the money, but that we continue to be an employer of choice so that we can recruit and retain the very finest law enforcement officers. So yes, we have to be mindful of what the compensation, total compensation packages are in the areas that are around us.
Let's talk a little bit about George Floyd when he was murdered in Minneapolis, and communities, including Burlington, called to defund the police. Some people did, call for the department to be defunded or at least shift some money away from the police department. And when you were stepping down as the chief there, you said city council's mismanagement of the Burlington Police Department was something that was noted in your letter. What do you think that we have learned from that approach looking back now?
I think it would be presumptuous to presume that we all learned the same lessons. I think that we can say with confidence that in most communities that chose to defund their police, it turned out in the long run to be a very expensive proposition for them. I think that we have learned in Burlington that it's going to take years to rebuild the now depleted police department. So my hope is that if circumstances arise where there is significant public outcry for reform or other really important topics, that instead of being as divisive as things were, not just in Burlington, but across the country in many, many cities, instead of being as divisive as they were in 2020, that we would do things the way Vermonters have always done best. We bring all the impacted stakeholders together and we talk about how to move forward.
All right, switching gears now. You are the first woman to serve as the department's leader. How does it feel?
I'm super excited to serve in this role, regardless of my gender. I feel like this is an opportunity to use my experience and my vantage point as a municipal police chief to bring together the entire law enforcement community in the state of Vermont during a time where strong and authentic leadership is truly needed. So I'm really excited about it generally. I try not to just say, shucks, about being the first woman, because I realize that it is really important. Like, it's very important for young girls and young women to see in me a role model, or that there's access to positions like this that have typically been male dominated.
You've served with 5 years with the Colchester's as Colchester's police chief. You were an officer and an interim chief for the Burlington's police department. So tell us a little bit about your leadership style.
Oh, geez. I would say that my leadership style is authentic and integrated. And by authentic, I mean, I don't try to act like a leader. I believe that I am who I am, and my ability to lead is an extension of my experience and my personal characteristics. And when I say integrated, my leadership is integrated into every part of my life. I don't come to work and act like a leader and then go home and act like a train wreck, or, be in other groups in the community as a coach or a church member or a neighbor. My leadership is integrated into everything I do. So if you ask me about my leadership style, I would say it's authentic, it's integrated. I hope it's approachable. I believe it's approachable. And so some of that is expressed in the fact that I'm a mother and now a grandmother. So I bring that to the table as a leader. I used to be a fierce athlete, not so much anymore. So I'm super competitive. I bring that to my leadership. But I'm very empathetic and caring too. And so all those things, I think, just go into the hopper, and what comes out is just Jen. I mean, I wear my heart on my sleeve and pretty much say it like it is. So
Well, you just touched on being a mom and also a brand new grandmother. Congratulations.
Thank you.
How do you find the work-life balance?
Wow. Sometimes I'm better at it than others. I can tell you that I place a high priority on my time with my family and friends. And I think it's necessary in order to be a good leader in this field to step out of the role of police chief or commissioner from time to time. So I do make it a main priority. There are certain times in my career where I've been better at the work-life balance than others. And there are times where the demands of the job just don't allow you to have balance, but you have to be very careful to make sure that that doesn't become the norm. And so when it's intense work, when it's 12-hour days, 14-hour days, you have to have a team around you to help support your family and raise your family. And I was very fortunate to have that when I was a young mom and now as a young grandma. So we have support and we have friends and family around that help us. If you're not careful, it's easy to let the lines blur. So I think living with intentionality, keeping the main thing, which is family first, is super important. And I think right now, it really varies week to week. Some weeks are very intense and I just don't have as much time as I would like to be with doing other things and be with my grandson and do other things, take care of my elderly mom. But generally speaking, on the balance, I think it works out pretty well. And it's all about keeping the main thing the top priority.
All right, Commissioner Morrison, thank you so much for joining us for NBC5 In Depth.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.